Hello again, YouTube family. Thanks for those of you who will join me on this episode of my YouTube channel, whether it's 1, 10, or 200. Thanks for joining me. Consider giving the channel a like, the video a like, the channel a subscribe. But let's dive in. This is somewhat sad story so far. And it's regarding the Titan submersible that dove into the North Atlantic Ocean on Sunday right at noon, lost communications, and now has been the effort of a massive search and rescue mission since then. So at 12 p.m. on Sunday, the Titan launched from the Polar Princess, that's its mothership. 1 hour and 45 minutes later, approximately 1:45 p.m., the mothership, Polar Princess, lost communications with the Titan submersible. And the communication was done via the Starlink satellite network. That's the Elon Musk satellite communication network. And that's due to under the ocean, you're not going to be able to get wireless communication, voice communication. So the communication was handled via satellite, and what they were doing were sending SMS messages back and text messages basically back and forth between the submersible and the ship. And again, about an hour and 45 minutes into the voyage, they lost communications, which is not unusual. There is a previous rider on this particular submersible, the Titan, run by OceanGate, who said he had gone on 4 separate dives in this submersible, and on every single occasion they lost communication with the mothership. So the lost communications is not alarming or distressing, since it appears to happen every time. Apparently, even with the satellite communication techniques, that doesn't work going that deep. Typically, for communications with a submersible craft, you would have a line tethered between the craft and the mothership, and that's how they would communicate. So at 7 p.m. the Titan was scheduled to resurface. It did not. And then at 9:40 p.m. on Sunday, this past Sunday, the Polar Princess notified Coast Guard of the overdue submersible. So the Coast Guard was notified. When they were notified, they started the search and rescue efforts immediately. And as you can see, it's nearly 8 hours after the Titan submersible went beneath the surface. Or almost 8 hours later is when search and rescue started. So the submersible was supposed to resurface at 7, 2 hours and 40 minutes after it's supposed to resurface. That's when the Coast Guard was notified, but it was nearly 8 hours after the submersible actually entered the water. So a massive amount of time. As far as the search and rescue efforts, you have the U.S., both Coast Guard and military cadet Coast Guard, along with France, 3 countries that have deployed rescue assistance in the form of ships and experts and submersibles of various types that have embarked on trying to rescue, hopefully, the crew members of this craft alive. And this is a map of the location they were going to. They were going to get a first-person view from this submersible craft of the wreck of the RMS Titanic. The Titanic sank in 1912. As everybody knows, it's a very big, long story, long-lasting, romanticized over the years. The movie Titanic years ago, the Cameron film, massively successful, and that re-energized people's interest in the Titanic, the romanticism of this sunken ship. But this is where they were going. They were going right around 400 miles off the coast of Canada to where the Titanic sits in its watery grave to view the sunken ship. The submersible itself has a carbon fiber and Titanic hull, carbon fiber and titanium hull, along with, as you can see in this image, that one little porthole at the front is the only window out of the craft. So you literally have just this one viewing porthole at the front of the submersible that you're able to see out of. As far as the passengers on board, this is a small craft, around 22 feet long, and it can hold 5 people on board. So you typically have 2 pilots and 3 crew members who are paying for the ride down to the Titanic. It's a very expensive ride, $250,000 a piece. So it's extremely wealthy people who can afford to dump $250,000, $250,000, on this several hours long ride down to the floor of the North Atlantic. As far as the people who are on board, you have Hamish Harding, who is a wealthy British explorer. He was 58 years old, or he is 58 years old. He is on board. Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman. Shahzada is 48, and his son is 19. You also have Paul Henry Nargeolet. He's a French diver and Titanic expert. And Stockton Rush, who is the founder and CEO of OceanGate, the company that operates these trips down to see the Titanic. And again, the people on board, very wealthy. Hamish Harding is a billionaire. I believe the Dawood family is also a billionaire family. And then you have the diver from France and the CEO of the company. This is a diagram of the craft. As you can see, everybody's basically sitting on the floor next to each other. And when they get down to the Titanic, to the sunken ship, they have to take turns viewing the ship out that porthole in the front. So it's very tight quarters. As you can see behind the passengers, there is this kind of dome shape out to the left, and that is the oxygen supply. Very vital to this story, because if you are watching this video right now, I'm recording this video on Wednesday. Tomorrow morning, on Thursday morning, this vessel will run out of oxygen. So, I mean, we are literally talking about the last hours of air the passengers on this craft have left. And it's not looking particularly good right now. Here's a map of the seafloor to give a bit of context to exactly how far they're going under the surface of the ocean. On the left side of this image, you have the 2 dots that indicates the 2 halves of the Titanic. The Titanic broke in half. The 2 halves settled on the full floor separately. I believe they're around 600 meters apart. And you can see the various buildings that it's showing in for a size comparison. You know, the pyramids of Egypt, the Eiffel Tower, and so forth. Tall buildings, if you're standing next to them looking at them, you sit them on the seafloor and they look particularly minuscule. And the craft is tiny that's going down here. I mean, that craft would be a mere speck in this diagram showing exactly how massively deep the North Atlantic seafloor is, where they're descending to. And I also have a video to help illustrate the insane depth that they're descending to.
When we're alone,
So that video, I think, does a pretty good job of illustrating exactly how insanely deep this crew is diving down to view the Titanic. And here is a video of the French diver that's on board and his complete awareness of how dangerous these dives are. He's on board this craft. He's done dives like this before in a submersible. He knows exactly how dangerous it is.
You are with no till stuck on the bottom. You can survive for a while because you can stay about 4 or 5 days on the bottom, which not help very much. Because if nobody can help you, that 5 days is with the oxygen, with the food, with the water and everything like that, but we know very well that we will die before with the temperature. Because the real problem at this depth is the temperature, because the water temperature is 33 degrees or something like that. And if you are in the sub and nothing is running anymore, making some heat, it's very cold. Even if we have some equipment and blah, 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 after a while, you dive because of the cold, which is not a bad way to dive because you fall in sleep and it's not, you don't suffer in this case.
So that was the French diver, very experienced diver. As I've said, he's gone on trips like this before, and is very clear about the dangers and how catastrophic they can be if any minute thing goes wrong. Actually explained there where the Titanic sits at the floor of the North Atlantic. The temperature is 33 degrees. If you go down in a submersible like this, and you get stuck, you lose power, and you're stuck there at the bottom of the seafloor. The temperature is 33 degrees. So you'll have no heating if the submersible is not running. You have no way to keep the submersible from succumbing to the cold temperatures. The people inside will start to suffer hypothermia and eventually will die. As he said, dying from hypothermia is not necessarily a catastrophic, painful death, because what you're going to do is basically slowly breathe to death till you can't breathe anymore. But in the process of that cold, you're going to fall asleep and just die while you're asleep. And then there's also the possibility of being stuck down there before someone can get to you. As he was saying, you're over 2 miles below the surface of the ocean. If you get stuck down there, it's possible people cannot get rescue equipment to you in time to save you before you run out of air. That right now is what all the rescue people are focused on, is the fact that we are literally in the last hours of oxygen availability for the people on that vessel. There was hope Tuesday night, again Wednesday morning, as planes deploying sonar heard knocking noises. They explained they heard a knocking sound in 30-minute intervals. So they heard knocking, 30 minutes later they heard knocking. That is a very old school method for people who operate in submarines. If the submarine gets trapped underwater, they know there's going to be a search and rescue operation to find them. People will be deploying sonar, and so you knock on the hull of the craft, then you stop, wait half an hour, knock again. One of the reasons why you don't constantly knock is because when you're stuck that far below the surface, you have to conserve your oxygen. You want to breathe as slowly as possible. You want to keep your body as still as possible, exert as little energy as possible, so you can take extremely slow breaths and try and stretch your oxygen supply as far as you possibly can. And so you'll knock, then you'll try to stay motionless and breathe slowly. Half an hour later, knock again. And that's what the rescuers were hoping that's what sonar was picking up. That there are people, at least someone in that craft is alive and knows to knock on the hull to try and help rescuers locate them. I did read an article saying that the Navy, because the sounds they picked up, the knocking they picked up, was sent to the U.S. Navy for analysis to see if it was a human being inside this submersible knocking to alert rescuers. The Navy said it was not. Lots of sounds in the ocean. They were going down to the Titanic. Around the Titanic is a massive debris field around 1 kilometer in diameter. Massive amount of debris from the Titanic, stuff that was on board the Titanic. You have shoes and clothes, dishes, pieces of the Titanic, metal pieces, wood pieces, all kinds of debris scattered around the wreckage of the Titanic. And as the currents flow at the bottom of the ocean, that debris can be picked up, it can be knocked against the Titanic itself. And that's what one of the rescuers was saying, that they didn't know if the knocking they were hearing was a human being trying to alert rescuers, or if it was just random debris getting knocked against something else, say, for instance, the Titanic's hull. But you did have rescuers that tried to focus their search toward where they heard the knocking from. Again, it's a knocking noise. It's a sound that's going to travel through the ocean, and can travel a long ways. And so where you hear the sound at is not necessarily where the knocking is coming from. It could have traveled 600 meters before you heard it. It could be somewhere else, and you're just picking up further down the line. And this is a video of a Coast Guard leader explaining the process that's going on right now.
Monday, the Coast Guard has coordinated search efforts with the U.S. and Canadian Coast Guard, Air National Guard aircraft, and the Polar Prince, which has searched a combined 7,600 square miles in area than the state of Connecticut. These search efforts have focused on both surface, with C-130 aircraft searching by sight and with radar, and subsurface, with P-3 aircraft who are able to drop and monitor sonar buoys. To date, those search efforts have not yielded any results. Our crews are working around the clock to ensure that we are doing everything possible to locate the Titan and the 5 crew members. Yesterday, we stood up a unified command consisting of expertise from the United States Coast Guard, the United States Navy, Canadian Armed Forces and Coast Guard, and the Titan's parent company, Ocean Gate Expedition.
And this is an image of the Victor 6000. This is, as some people have said, possibly the crew's last hope. The Victor 6000 arrived today, is being deployed. It's a unmanned submersible that can reach extremely deep depths. And it is getting deployed to try and find the submersible, hopefully before oxygen runs out. And took a while for the Victor 6000 to get there, but it's there, and people are hoping that it will be the saving grace for the crew of the Titan. Another thing that I picked up that's a companion to this story. The Titan tragedy shows the stark contrast between when the wealthy are in peril versus when the poor are in peril. As I said, $250,000 per person to take a ride on this vessel. Earlier this month, a boat of migrants, some 400 to 700 migrants, left Libya across the Mediterranean, headed for Italy. The boat capsized, and many men, women, and children died. Some of the people, whoever watches this video, some of you watching this video probably did not realize that boat capsized in the Mediterranean, carrying the migrants from Libya trying to seek asylum in Italy. The media barely covered it, and the media barely noticed. You have the Titan drama unfolding. People are literally watching with bated breath, constantly picking up updates on what's happening with the Titan. Meanwhile, while this tragedy is going on, and this Titan, I don't care how much money you have or don't have, a loss of life, potential loss of life, is tragic in any situation. However, while this Titan drama is unfolding, you still have bodies being recovered in Europe. There were 104 survivors of the migrant vessel that left Libya, and we still have men, women, and children's bodies being discovered. By the time it's all said and done, this migrant boat capsizing and the loss of life that ensued will most likely be the European Union's biggest migrant disaster of all time. And that's going on this month. It's going on. You still have bodies being discovered while the Titan disaster is going on. Also with the Titan, you had safety concerns that were brought up prior to this incident. You have the Marine Technology Society, which is a group made up of ocean engineers, technologists, policymakers, and educators who warned against OceanGate's experimental approach to exploring very deep ocean depths. OceanGate put out publicity material stating that Titan would meet or exceed the DNV-GL safety standards while seemingly not actually being interested in actually having the vessel assessed by that same organization. The DNV is an organization that monitors the building of these kinds of craft. They inspect them and they approve or disapprove of them based on what they see with the vessel, the capacity of the vessel to actually withstand these massive depths. You also have David Lockridge, who is a former OceanGate employee. Lockridge and OceanGate ended up in a lawsuit against one another, but Lockridge was concerned, as he was an employee at OceanGate. While he was an employee at OceanGate, he was concerned about the hull's materials and lack of testing on the hull. Lockridge had said he would not authorize any crewed voyage without further testing, and thus he got fired. He sued OceanGate for improper termination, and the lawsuit. He sued OceanGate. OceanGate in turn sued him. The lawsuit was settled out of court, but you did have safety concerns being brought up, both by a very reputable ocean organization, a maritime organization that actually certifies vessels such as this, that is filled with experts, engineers and the like, that can say this vessel is sound and should have no problems doing what its mission is. And then you have Lockridge, the employee. You also had a person who was supposed to take a trip on the Titan who backed out because of his own safety concerns. That person is also a wealthy person because his occupation was listed as adventurer. And honestly, if your occupation is a professional adventurer, you're rich. I'm assuming you were born very well off if you are able to live life, enjoy life, and have the occupation of professional adventure taker. But that was also someone who had safety concerns enough that he backed out of taking a trip on the Titan. And also, with this story, you have, because they're taking a trip to the Titanic, you have this couple, which is Isidore and Ida Strauss. They are two of the people that died on the Titanic in 1912. Isidore and Ida Strauss, coincidentally enough, have a great-great-granddaughter who is Wendy Rush, the wife of the CEO of OceanGate. The guy who made this company, who's on this vessel, this lost vessel, his wife is the great-great-granddaughter of this couple who was on the Titanic. This couple is not some obscure passengers on the ship. Survivors of the Titanic disaster recalled seeing Isidore Strauss, the husband, refuse a seat on a lifeboat because women and children were still waiting to flee the sinking ship. So Isidore Strauss, on the Titanic, on the night it sank, passengers observed him, survivors recalled seeing him refuse a seat on a lifeboat because there were still women and children that needed to be evacuated from the ship. Isidore's wife, Ida Strauss, refused, declared she would not leave her husband of 4 decades, and the two were seen arm in arm on the deck of the Titanic as it sank. They are a very famous couple. They are the old couple that were just holding each other knowing they were about to die. Isidore made the decision, I'm not going to take a seat that a woman or a child could take. And his wife said, well, I'm not going either. And they romantically held each other as the Titanic sank. They were put into the movie, not the same way, but in the Titanic movie, the James Cameron movie, the couple that was laying together holding each other in bed as the Titanic sank and as the water rose, that was the homage in the film to the Strauss couple. But their daughter is literally the OceanGate CEO's wife. Their great-great-granddaughter is the wife of the OceanGate CEO, Wendy Rush. And here we have a TikTok video literally taken as the Titan submersible launched. It's very short. Whoever that person is that said she was an influencer that was on the Polar Prince, the mothership of the Titan, and she shot that video, that TikTok video, as the Titan vessel launched behind her in the background. So you have the vessel, it's lost. They're trying to find it. They have covered a area about twice the size of Connecticut looking for this vessel. So the Titan itself, it's equipped with lead bars and sandbags. That's what helps it submerge into the ocean. And it can release the lead, it can release the sandbags to cause it to go back to the surface. It also has a balloon that it can launch that will help it have enough buoyancy to get back to the surface. So those are the three fail safes. You have the lead pipes, the sandbags, and the balloon. And so far they've not found it on the surface. There's also lights on the outside of the vessel that are intended to help alert search and rescue to the craft. And so they don't know if it's down at the bottom, ocean floor, dead in the water. They don't know if it's caught. One of the dangers that was brought up by numerous divers, numerous ocean adventurers, and Stockton Rush, the CEO of the company OceanGate that's on the craft himself, had said that one of the dangers is under the ocean you have fishing nets, you have ropes around the Titanic, you have various ropes, there's lots of ropes around ships. You have cables and ropes around the Titanic, and one of the fears is getting hung up on a net, on a rope, some kind of line where you can't get back to the surface. You're stuck, hanging, caught up in a net, caught up in a rope, in some kind of line that's underwater. That's one of the possibilities. You have all kinds of speculation. What happened to this submersible? Why did it not get back to the surface? And you've had people speculate if the hull was compromised. Down where the Titanic is, where they were going, the pressure down there is 6,000 pounds per square inch. As experts on diving said, if the craft was compromised, if the hull was compromised, the craft and the people inside would be crushed instantly. It would be instantaneous. There would not be pain and suffering, fear of impending death. It would just be very fast. But you have experts saying that if the hull was compromised, it would have made a very loud sound, and all these various planes and ships that are trying to use sonar to find this vessel would have picked up that sound. They're saying if the hull was compromised at a very deep depth, like where the Titanic is at, where they were going, that the sound of that sudden crushing of everything, the people, the vessel, would have made a sound that would have been obvious to the search and rescue folks. So you have a number of experts saying they don't believe the hull was compromised because that sound wasn't picked up. You have the possibility of some kind of failure in the systems, that the vessel itself is powered by 2 fans on the outside that they maneuvered around with. I mean, literally, they're using a game console controller, a PlayStation-like controller, to move this vessel around. It only travels at about 3 knots, which is very slow. And they use a game controller to control it, which, honestly, to me, would be a red flag from the get-go. If you're using a aftermarket game controller to control your submarine, I don't want to go on it. But I'm not an adventurer. I wouldn't go on it anyway because I have issues with claustrophobia. Being in that confined to space, there's not enough space in there to stand up. It would drive me nuts, even for a few hours, going down under the ocean to any depths, even not even as far as they were going. And you can't even stand up. You're just crunched up with everybody else in there. I couldn't do it, but you have the fail-safes of the sandbags, the lead pipes, you have the balloon, and you have this thing being guided by a controller. The lighting inside the vessel, they said it was from Outdoor World, like literally a sporting goods shop. They went to get lighting, I'm assuming battery-powered lighting for the inside. You have that small compartment behind them where the oxygen is at. That's their breathing, their ability to breathe. And they had very little room to take any kind of food or water with them. So you're talking about Sunday, they went into the ocean with whatever, maybe a water bottle, maybe a little bag of food in their pocket. That's it. No place to go to the bathroom. All crunched up together in this tiny little submersible. And tomorrow morning, early Thursday morning, their oxygen is estimated to run out. As I said before, you have an experienced diver on board. The French diver that's on board knows that there's a limit to the oxygen supply. And one way you can try and extend that, by not by a lot, but by some, is to slow your breathing down, to slow your metabolic rate down, to just try and be motionless and just breathe slowly, extremely slowly, and use as little oxygen as possible to try and stretch that oxygen out a little bit. Maybe get another 20 minutes, maybe get another half hour. I mean, they've been down there for days. If you can breathe slowly enough, maybe you can get another 2 hours out of it. You know, I'm not an experienced diver. But they did have an experienced diver on board, someone who knows that if they got a power failure and they were stuck down 2 miles under the surface of the ocean, to try and limit what you do, don't talk, don't move, and just try and slow your breathing down as slow as you can get it. Try and stretch your oxygen out as much as possible. Try and give the rescuers as much time as possible to find you. And such as the knocking. Again, the Navy said the knocking did not come from the vessel. The knocking sounds were sent to the Navy. They tested it. They said it did not come from the Titan. The rescuers were hoping it was, because that would signal that at least somebody's alive on the vessel and knows to knock against the hull to try and help rescuers find them. At some point, as the Coast Guard leadership said, they would have to move from a search and rescue mission to a recovery mission once they can reasonably assume the oxygen has been expended. And again, even with the oxygen running out, you're going to fall asleep. If you're in that vessel, you're going to fall asleep and die when you can't breathe any longer. And it supposedly would be a peaceful death. However, tragic. Any death would still be tragic. But that's where we're at. You have a massive effort underway. And like I said, very different from the poor people whose vessel capsized in the Mediterranean. Not a massive rescue effort there. But this vessel had billionaires on board, and so there is a massive effort. I mean, the cost of this rescue effort is massive. And for the families of the people on board, if they find the vessel with the people still alive, or at least some of the people still alive, it will be worth the expense because their loved one is still alive. Hopefully, I hope for them to be found alive. I don't want any tragic thing to befall any of these folks. But literally a few hours from now, their oxygen will run out. So we have to just hope they will be found, that some break in the search will happen and they'll be found. But anyway, thanks for watching the video. And despite the downer of the video is, hopefully you'll still be able to have a decent day tomorrow.